She didn't ask, she declared it. Standing on my driveway like she was queen of the suburbs, Karen clutched her pink clipboard like it was a royal decree. "My daughter's wedding is next Saturday," she said, "and we'll be using your pool for the reception." I blinked. I thought it was a joke, a weird HOA prank. But then she adjusted her sunglasses, tapped the clipboard, and said, "Make sure the gate is unlocked." And just like that, she turned and walked away. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another HOA dispute. This was war. This is not just a story about a backyard pool. It's about boundaries, the kind that are drawn in property lines and the kind you draw when someone tries to walk all over you with heels and entitlement. One woman thought she could claim whatever she wanted. What she didn't know was, I had 200 boxes of Jell-O in the pantry and a plan that would turn her wedding into the internet's favorite disaster. If you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you've probably met a Karen. The one who weaponizes bylaws, who inspects trash bins like she's searching for state secrets, who thinks your private property is just unused community space waiting for her to redecorate. Well, she picked the wrong yard. I'm not the kind of neighbor who picks fights. But I am the kind who documents everything, holds grudges politely, and when pushed, fights back with gelatin. Buckle up. This is the true story of how a pool, a wedding, and a petty homeowner collided in the most ridiculous suburban showdown you'll ever hear. And it all started with one clipboard, one command, and zero permission. You ever look back at a moment and realize the warning signs were there the whole time? The clipboard. The fake smile. The way Karen always said "we" when she meant me. I should have seen it coming. Her takeover of the HOA wasn't some hostile coup with smoke bombs and late-night meetings. No, it was way more terrifying. It was legal. It started with our old HOA president, Mr. Harold, retired vet, nice guy, thought email was the devil. When he moved to Florida to be closer to his grandkids, the position opened up. The HOA, being the mess it was, didn't hold a formal election. They just asked for volunteers at the next community barbecue. Guess who raised her hand first? Karen, clipboard already in hand, like she was born ready to regulate grass height. The board, most of them retired, busy, or just wanting peace and quiet, nodded her in. No questions asked, no oversight. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just your nosy neighbor anymore. She was the acting HOA president. And once she had that flimsy little title, she ran with it like it was a royal charter. At first it was small stuff. A strongly worded letter about someone's holiday lights being too enthusiastic. A warning about spiritually aggressive wind chimes. Petty, sure, but nothing worth starting a war over. Then the notices started arriving. Not mailed, hand-delivered. Typed on pink paper, signed with her little swirling signature. My favorite? We recommend you repaint your garage door to better match the community's intended aesthetic. What aesthetic, Karen? Beige oppression? She called them recommendations, but they came with fines if ignored. People just complied to avoid the hassle. And that's when I realized she wasn't enforcing the rules. She was writing them. There was no transparency, no ballots. She'd show up at meetings with proxy votes, allegedly collected from elderly residents who gave verbal consent. No one ever saw those papers. I asked once, "Karen, can I see the HOA charter?" She smiled and said, "It's being updated. I'll send a copy when it's ready." That was 8 months ago. People started whispering. Mr. Donnelly, 3 streets over, got fined for putting up a Veterans for Peace sign. Maria, the sweetest grandma you'll ever meet, got a violation for her mailbox flowers being visually inconsistent. You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. Karen's HO became less about community and more about control. She walked the neighborhood like a warden doing inspections. Always the same routine, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, that half smile like she already knew she was better than you. And then came the kicker. She added a line, just a line, into the community event notice for her daughter's wedding. Reception to be held at the community pool, Lot 37. Lot 37 is my house. She never asked, never even hinted. Just quietly typed my private backyard into her plans like she was assigning a venue. That's when it clicked. To Karen, ownership wasn't about deeds or fences, it was about audacity. If she said it with enough confidence, enough fake authority, people would just go along. But not me, not this time. Because here's the thing about HOA bullies. They thrive in silence, in fear, in neighbors who don't want to rock the boat. But when someone finally pushes back, when someone stands up, even with a ladle and 200 boxes of gelatin, they start to crack. And trust me, the cracks were just beginning to show. Karen thought she had the system locked down. But what she didn't know was, I had already started boiling water. Next, the Jell-O master plan, revenge, red powder, and a dog named Max. You ever feel a plan form in your head so fast it scares even you? That was me, standing at my fence, watching Karen's heels click down the street, clipboard swinging like a weaponized metronome. She'd just declared my private pool the official venue for her daughter's wedding reception. Didn't ask, didn't blink. She just assigned it, like my backyard was some unclaimed square on her HOA monopoly board. At first I thought I was hallucinating. Even Max, my golden retriever, tilted his head like, did that really just happen? And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because what else do you do when your reality gets hijacked by crazy? That's when I remembered the boxes. You see, 6 months earlier I'd hit a clearance sale at the grocery store. Red cherry Jello. Like, a lot of it. We're talking industrial stupid amounts, maybe for a cookout, a kid's party, I don't even remember. But I bought it, dozens of boxes, stuffed it in the pantry and forgot all about it. Until that moment when Karen treated my home like a resort. That moment when she said, make sure the gate is unlocked. Something inside me snapped. Quietly, but with intent. If she wanted a pool party, she was going to get one. Just not the kind she expected. That night I sat on my patio chair, staring at the clean, perfect water I'd spent months and thousands of dollars renovating. Every tile scrubbed. Every chemical balanced. My spring project, my sanctuary. And I said out loud, not today, Karen. Max wagged his tail like he agreed. I Googled it first, how much gelatin to thicken a 20,000-gallon pool. The answer? A lot. Like, are you okay? Levels of gelatin. But I didn't need to fill the whole thing, just the shallow end. Just enough to turn fantasy into farce. The next morning I hit the hardware store. Buckets, industrial pots, and a paddle stirrer big enough to mix cement, or in my case, dessert doom. The cashier raised an eyebrow as I unloaded a shopping cart filled with gelatin packets. I grinned. Pool party, I said. He laughed, poor man, he had no idea. For the next 4 nights I became a midnight dessert chemist. I boiled water in batches, stirred in red powder until it shimmered like danger, and poured it carefully into the shallow end, section by section. Max would sit on the deck watching me like I'd lost my mind. And maybe I had. But I was committed. This wasn't about being petty. Okay, it was slightly about being petty. But mostly it was about drawing a line. A sugary, wobbling, jiggly red line. You don't get to barge into someone's space, claim it, and expect them to play nice. You don't get to lie about community property and turn someone's sanctuary into a splash zone. So yeah, I made art. Art that quivered in the moonlight. By day 4, the shallow end looked like a jelly sea from a Dr. Seuss nightmare. I dropped a tennis ball onto the surface. It bounced. Victory. I laminated a sign. Caution. Experimental dessert cooling in progress. Then I installed a few discreet security cameras. You know, for legal reasons. What Karen didn't know was while she was out picking floral centerpieces, I was building a red ocean she couldn't cross. I didn't need lawyers. I didn't need drama. I had gelatin. And Max. And a stubborn sense of humor. Because here's the thing. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes in powdered form, mixed with boiling water and served room temp in a backyard pool. And just in time, too. because the next morning I heard the sound of flip-flops slapping pavement. Karen's niece had arrived, with towels, floats, and enough teenage entitlement to fill a beach. She was about to meet the Jello. Up next, when the wedding met the wobble, chaos, phones, and flying groomsmen. The morning of the wedding was loud. You know that kind of loud where it sounds like someone's building a circus next door? Yeah, that. Trucks backing in, folding chairs clattering. Karen barking orders like she was directing the Normandy invasion, except instead of soldiers she had florists and caterers. She was wearing this aggressively pastel suit that screamed, "My daughter is getting married and I need everyone to know I'm in charge." I sipped my coffee on the patio, sunglasses on. Max at my feet, tail wagging slowly, like he sensed the storm coming. I didn't need to intervene, I just had to watch. Because the pool was ready. Glistening, gleaming, vibrant red like a warning sign. The shallow end thickened overnight, perfectly set. It didn't look like water anymore, it looked like danger in dessert form. Around 10 a.m. the guests started showing up. It began innocently enough. A few curious glances toward the fence. And then whispers. "Oh my God, is that Jell-O? No way, it's fake, right?" Someone took a photo. Someone else said, "That's kind of cute." Cute? That was not the word I was going for. But hey, at least they weren't climbing over the fence yet. And then she arrived. Karen's niece. Same girl who strutted into my yard the first time like it was her private cabana. This time she brought reinforcements, 2 teenage boys with towels, a cooler, and a Bluetooth speaker blaring bad decisions. They opened my gate. Yes, my gate, which still had a laminated sign that read, "Caution, Jell-O in progress. No lift guard on duty." But they didn't even read it. She stepped inside, stopped dead, and just said, "God, this is still happening?" One of the boys poked the pool with his flip-flop and made a squelch sound with his mouth. Then they all laughed. That's when I stood up. Max followed, calm but alert. Not barking, just watching. "Ready?" "You lost?" I asked. The girl blinked. "We're just waiting here before the ceremony starts," she said, like I was the one being weird. "We need somewhere to chill." I nodded toward the red wobbling surface. "Plenty of chill right there," I said. "Just don't dive unless you've signed a waiver." They left without a word, except for the eye roll, so aggressive I swear it changed wind direction. Half an hour later the groomsmen arrived. Now these weren't your clean-cut magazine-groomed groomsmen. These were early-day drinking, midlife crisis energy groomsmen. One of them wore sunglasses that looked like they belonged to a failed poker player in Reno, and he was already double-fisting beers. He saw the pool, stopped and shouted, $50 if you belly flop." Another guy, clearly one drink past good judgment, took the challenge. He lined up like he was about to enter the Olympics. Someone counted down. 3, 2, 1. He launched. What happened next was something between poetry and lawsuit. He hit the surface and bounced. Not sank, bounced. Like a human-sized gummy bear hitting a trampoline made of nightmares. People screamed, laughed. Bones were out. TikToks were born. Even the bride watching from the deck was doubled over laughing. And that's when Karen appeared. She emerged from the garage like a villain in a Hallmark horror film. Saw the bouncing groomsmen. Saw the crowd. Saw the red. And shrieked. Tiny blood-curdling banshee shriek. She ran over screaming about property damage, lawsuits, and brain trauma from gelatin incidents. She grabbed the groomsman's arm. He just laughed and shouted, "Best wedding ever," and walked off with a towel like he was a folk hero. Karen turned to me. "You're going to pay for this," she snapped. I smiled. "You're welcome. That man just made your wedding go viral." I pointed to the sea of phones filming. "Smile. You're trending." And I wasn't wrong. By noon, Karen Jell-O pool and Wedding Gone Wobble were all over local Facebook groups. Memes popped up within the hour. One showed Karen holding a spoon with the caption, "Taste justice." You know what they say. Revenge is best served cold. Mine just happened to jiggle. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She was about to take this to the courtroom of crazy. Next, when Karen calls the lawyers, lawsuit threats and legal laughter. Here's the thing people always get wrong about this story. They think it's just about Jell-O, about pettiness, about a pool prank that went viral. But that's just the surface, literally. What this was really about was boundaries. Not the kind you draw on paper. The kind you draw with silence, with tolerance, with the quiet hope that your neighbors will respect you if you respect them. But entitlement? Entitlement doesn't recognize those lines. It steps right over them, smiling, waving, holding a clipboard. You see, people like Karen, people who crave control, don't just want authority. They want access to your time, your peace, your space. At first it starts small. A suggestion about your lawn, a casual comment about your paint color, an uninvited walk through your side yard to check the fence alignment. And if you don't push back, they keep going. They build this invisible logic in their heads that your space is theirs to curate. My pool wasn't just water in a hole. It was where I drank coffee at 6 a.m. on Sundays, where Max chased tennis balls while I read bad crime novels, where I sat during the pandemic, watching the world fall apart, trying to hold on to something that still felt mine. And yet, Karen looked at it and thought, that'll make a great reception venue. No conversation, no permission, just clipboard confidence and a blind belief that her daughter's wedding dreams mattered more than my privacy. The worst part? She truly believed she was entitled to it. Because we were in the same HOA. Because she wore a pastel suit and barked orders with a smile. Because no one had ever told her no. Until I did. And when I did, she acted like I'd burned the Constitution. Let me tell you a quick story. My neighbor 2 doors down, Greg, he's a quiet guy. Vietnam vet. Built his own garden boxes by hand. Never complains. Last fall he caught Karen in his backyard. Not on the sidewalk, not near the fence. In the yard, picking flowers. She told him she was helping prune the overgrowth. He didn't yell. He just started locking his gate. Same as I did. Because when someone doesn't recognize your line, you don't erase it. You draw it darker. That's what the Jell-O really was. Not revenge. Not sabotage. Just the loudest no I could legally serve. People say I overreacted, that it was funny, that it went viral. And sure, it was funny. But it was also a message. This is my property, this is my peace. You don't get to rewrite that. Entitlement spreads like water, filling the lowest places first. It seeps under doors, through fences, into calendars and parties and spaces you didn't think were up for negotiation. But boundaries? Boundaries are the dams. They hold the line. And I held mine with 300 boxes of cherry red resolve. Karen didn't understand that. Still does. Because right after the wedding, she doubled down. She didn't apologize. Didn't reflect. She lawyered up. She said I humiliated her family, that I sabotaged a community event, that I turned a sacred day into a circus. But let's be honest. The circus was already in town, I just gave it a stage. And now? Now she was threatening to take it to court. Next, when Karen calls the lawyers, lawsuit threats and legal laughter. 1 week after the wedding disaster, just when I thought things might finally cool down, like a well-set Jell-O mold, I found a manila envelope on my doorstep. It was thick, stamped, sealed with the kind of official drama only someone with a paralegal brother and a personal grudge could muster. Inside, a stack of legal paperwork that felt like it had been written in Comic Sans rage and printer ink desperation. At the top, formal notice of intent to sue, filed by none other than Karen E. Whitmore. Claim: malicious sabotage of a community event. I wish I were joking. According to the document, I had committed the following sins: emotional distress, public defamation, non-compliant neighborhood conduct, whatever that means. And, my personal favorite, intentional gelatin obstruction. You know you've crossed into madness when a dessert becomes a weapon in a legal dispute. The best part? She included screenshots of memes and TikToks as evidence of reputational damage. One had her face photoshopped with a spoon and the words, "Taste Justice." Another showed the groomsmen bouncing off my pool with the caption, "Karen's Kool-Aid Baptism." To her, these were exhibits. To the internet, they were instant classics. I didn't panic. But I wasn't stupid either. I sent the packet to a friend of mine, a real lawyer, not a clipboard enthusiast. He read it, paused for a long moment, and said, "This is so dumb it might actually collapse in court from shame." Still, I'd prepared my own response. Calm, factual, ironclad. I included receipts for all my gelatin purchases, photos of my caution Jell-O in progress sign, security footage showing Karen's niece entering my property without permission, and a time-stamped video of the groomsmen's legendary bounce. I also added a short note. At no point was permission granted for the use of my pool. Any entry was trespassing as documented. My lawyer friend topped it off with a beautifully vicious closing line. This pattern of behavior reflects a consistent disregard for private property and legal boundaries, disguised as community enthusiasm. Translation: Karen was screwed. But she wasn't done. 3 days later, I got a visit from a city inspector. Karen had filed a new complaint, this time accusing my pool of being a public health hazard. Apparently, gelatin is now a bio sheet. The inspector showed up with a clipboard of his own, but this one had authority. I greeted him politely, offered him lemonade, and walked him to the backyard. He stared at the red, jiggling pool like he'd just entered a culinary crime scene, dipped a test strip into the gelatin, squinted, and chuckled. "Well," he said, "it's not exactly a drowning risk anymore, more like a very large, weird snack." He checked the filter, the fence, everything up to code. He even took a selfie with the pool. Said his wife had been following the story on Facebook and needed proof it was real. Report result? No violations found. Medium risk for ants. When he left, I waved at Karen's house across the street. She was peeking out from behind the blinds. When she saw the inspector laughing, she slammed her door so hard her HOA plaque fell off. I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe just a little. Because here's the truth. People like Karen don't actually want justice. They want submission. They want silence. And when you fight back, not with anger but with evidence and humor, they lose control. That week, HOA board members started whispering. Some had seen the memes. Some had gotten emails. All of them were tired. Karen was spiraling. And the board? They were about to do something they hadn't done in years. Next, the HOA reckoning, when the board finally listened. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you know one thing. They don't move fast. But pressure? Pressure moves them. And Karen had created pressure like a pressure cooker with a broken release valve. After the wedding fiasco, the gelatin showdown, the TikTok chaos, and the city inspector taking selfies in my backyard, the board had finally had enough. I wasn't invited to the emergency meeting. Of course not. Karen had called it herself, framing it as a response to neighborhood defamation and an attack on HOA authority. But something was different this time. Something had shifted. Because everyone showed up. Not just the usual 3 members who nodded through Karen's speeches like bobbleheads. The quiet ones. The ones who usually kept their heads down. The ones who'd been fined for wind chimes, lawn flamingos, mailbox flags. They came, and they were done being silent. Word spread fast. Apparently, when Karen opened the meeting, she launched into a monologue about restoring order and punishing vigilante behavior. She brought printouts of memes, demanded a formal censure against me. But then Greg, my veteran neighbor, spoke. He's not a loud man, doesn't like conflict. But that night he stood up and said, "Karen entered my yard without permission. She picked my flowers, and when I asked her why, she said she was editing the aesthetic. Then Maria spoke up, the grandmother who got fined for her flower boxes. Then it snowballed. Violation after violation. Stories of Karen rewriting rules mid-meeting, embarrassing families over Halloween lights, spying on backyard birthday parties. One neighbor pulled out a file folder labeled Karen Incidents. It had tabs. And then someone showed the video. Not mine, someone else's. A guest from the wedding had filmed the entire Jell-O pool incident. From Karen's niece entering the yard to the groomsmen belly flopping into gelatin glory. The room, silent, except for the sound of Karen's voice in the video yelling, "You ruined everything!" And then came the vote. Unanimous. Karen was officially removed as acting president of the HOA. She tried to fight it. Said it was a smear campaign. Said I had planted the Jello to frame her. Said this neighborhood had turned into a suburban mob. But no one bought it, because the truth was laid bare in photos, footage, and first-hand stories. She was done. The following evening, Paul, the actual president now, knocked on my door. He didn't bring a clipboard, just a manila envelope and a tired smile. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said. Inside was a formal apology letter from the HOA board. It admitted they had failed to keep checks on Karen, that she'd abused her position, that my response, while unconventional, had been a reasonable assertion of property rights in the face of repeated boundary violations. There was also a voucher stapled to the bottom. Free pool cleaning, courtesy of the HOA. I laughed. "You know it's not even dirty, right?" Paul shrugged. "Consider it a peace offering, and maybe a thank you." There was something satisfying about it. Not the victory. Not the recognition. Just the moment. The moment people stopped pretending Karen's behavior was just strict organization and finally called it what it was. Control, abuse, entitlement disguised as leadership. But here's the lesson. Sometimes the biggest shifts come from the smallest stands. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I stirred gelatin by moonlight and told the truth when asked. That's it. Karen's porch light stayed off after that. Her clipboard disappeared. The HOA email blasts stopped. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because just when things started feeling normal again, she came back. Next, the bride returns, laughter, gratitude, and the real wedding highlight. It had been a quiet week. No screaming. No pink clipboards. No city inspectors asking if gelatin counted as a building material. Karen's porch light stayed off. Her emails, mercifully silent. It felt like someone had finally taken the batteries out of a fire alarm that had been screeching for years. Then, one evening, as the sun started sinking and Max and I were on the patio watching the pool catch the last gold light of day, there was a knock. Not at the front door. At the back gate. I got up slowly, uncertain, pulled it open, and froze. It was her. The bride. Karen's daughter. The one I'd never actually met. The one whose wedding I had supposedly ruined. But she didn't look angry. No clipboard in sight. Just a girl in sneakers and a sweatshirt, hair tied up, holding a paper cup of iced coffee. She looked tired, but also lighter. She smiled. "Mind if I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked up to the edge of the pool, still red, still wobbling in defiance of all logic, and just stared. Hands in her pockets, saying nothing at first. Then, with a deep breath, she said, "This was the best part of my wedding. I don't say. Didn't expect that. Didn't deserve that." But she kept talking. Told me about how the DJ canceled last minute. How the centerpieces Karen picked were so tall no one could see across the tables. How the catering was late. How 2 groomsmen got into a fight over a stolen boutonniere. How her grandmother almost slipped on the slick patio tile and fractured her hip. And through it all, she had smiled. Politely. Quietly. Because that's what a bride is supposed to do. But then? Then came the bounce. The moment the groomsmen launched into the pool and turned the whole reception into a viral slapstick sketch. And for the first time that day, she laughed. I cried 3 times on my wedding day, she said. But that was the only time I cried from joy. She sat down on one of my patio chairs, eyes still on the pool. Max walked over and leaned against her leg, like he knew she needed it. We talked for an hour. About nothing and everything. About how sometimes people like Karen plan so hard they forget who they're planning for. She told me she and her new husband had started a YouTube channel, mostly comedy and wedding planning fails. They wanted to do a video about the pool, about the Jell-O, about what it really meant to lose control and find freedom in the chaos. I told her I'd think about it. Before she left, she pulled out her phone. Mind if we take a picture? We stood together by the edge of the red wobble. She captioned it, "The best part of the wedding, long live the Jell-O King." It blew up. Again, people who'd missed the original saga now knew the full story. Comments flooded in, laughing, cheering, sharing their own Karen tales. It became something more than a viral video. It became a moment of connection. And that's the lesson. Sometimes the most meaningful memories come from the most unexpected disasters. Not the perfect speeches, not the floral arches, but the moments when things fall apart just enough to make us laugh. We both laughed again before she left. And as I closed the gate behind her, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of something else. Something lighter, something better, something a little wobbly, but strong enough to bring people together. Because once the bride came back, the neighbors followed. And that's when I knew. It was time for Jigglefest. Next, the birth of Jigglefest, from petty pool war to neighborhood tradition. It started with a sticky note. No HOA letterhead. No clipboard. Just a neon yellow square taped to my backyard fence. It read, "Thanks for the laughs, we needed it. Your neighbors." And below that, in a different handwriting, "Keep the Jell-O." I stood there staring at it for a long moment, sunlight bouncing off the red, jiggling surface of the pool like it was alive. Max barked once, then laid back down at my feet like, "Told you so." Something had changed. Not just on my property. In the whole neighborhood. The week after the wedding, people started slowing down when they walked past my house. Not to complain. To look, to laugh, to whisper to each other like they were sharing an inside joke. Teenagers on bikes circled the block like my pool was a tourist attraction. Parents took detours on their morning walks, chuckling as they peeked through the fence. Old Mr. Donnelly from 3 streets over stopped by with his walker just to say, "Never thought I'd live to see the day gelatin beat tyranny." That's when the idea hit me. Not revenge. Not defiance. Celebration. I didn't send out invites. Who didn't book a DJ. Didn't decorate. I just taped a sign to the fence. Simple, handwritten, Sharpie on cardboard. Saturday, noon. Bring a spoon. That Saturday, the first family showed up at 11:45. By noon, there were kids everywhere. Lawn chairs unfolded like dominoes. Someone brought lemonade. Someone else brought whipped cream. And someone, still don't know who, showed up with tiny cocktail umbrellas and stuck them in the gelatin like it was a tropical drink. Max trotted around like he was hosting the event himself. And me? I just sat back and watched the neighborhood come back to life. No rules, no fines, no speeches about HOA compliance. Just laughter. Conversations. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months sharing folding chairs and spoonfuls of solidarity. One woman brought her teenage daughter who said, "Wait, is this the pool from TikTok?" Another guy pulled out his phone and whispered, "Mind if I live stream this?" I shrugged. "Sure, just don't belly flop." It wasn't just a party. It was something else. Something bigger than gelatin. It was a reminder that community doesn't need a clipboard. That humor can heal. That boundaries can be respected without barbed wire. And that's how Jigglefest was born. Not out of planning or power or HOA permission, but out of chaos, color, and one ridiculous decision to say, you know what, let's have some fun. That first year, the pool was red. The next year, I made it lime green. Then purple. Then orange. I even installed underwater lights to make it glow at night like radioactive Jello from another planet. Kids took pictures. Adults shook their heads and smiled. Even Paul, the new HOA president, showed up with cookies one year and said, "Pretty sure this violates every rule we ever had, but I'm not stopping it." And here's the lesson. We spend so much time trying to be serious, trying to be in control, trying to manage life. But sometimes, the weirdest moments are the ones people remember most. Not the ones that go to plan, but the ones that jiggle, crack us open, and remind us to laugh again. Karen never showed up to a single Jigglefest, but her presence lingered. Every time someone asked, "Wait, what started all this?" I just smiled and said, "A wedding, a pool, and someone who thought they could take without asking." And that usually got a laugh. But the real story? It wasn't about her anymore. It was about what came next. Because sometimes standing up for your boundaries creates a space big enough for everyone to finally breathe. But Karen? She wasn't done just yet. Next, gelatin justice and the final goodbye. Karen packs her clipboard. 2 weeks after Jigglefest, it happened. No flyers. No announcements. No HOA email laced with passive-aggressive bullet points. Just a quiet for sale sign stuck in the grass of Karen's perfectly manicured front lawn. I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe it was a prank, or maybe she was helping someone else sell. Because Karen leaving? That wasn't just moving, that was a seismic event. But then I saw it. Bach, a HOA. And Karen herself, standing on her porch without her usual pastel blazer, hair tied back, no clipboard in sight. She looked smaller. Not physically. Just diminished. No shouting. No stomping. Just a woman quietly closing a chapter she had once ruled like a petty suburban empress. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't gloat. I just poured myself a drink, sat by the pool, now lime green for summer, and watched the sun bounce off the gelatin surface like a victory medal. Max rested at my feet, tail thumping in the warm air. We'd won. Not just against Karen. Against everything she represented. The noise. The control. The entitled illusion that authority justifies trespass. In the days that followed, neighbors speculated about where she'd gone. Someone said she was moving to a gated community across town, one without an HOA. The irony was so rich I could have poured it over Jell-O. But let me tell you something most people don't realize. Karen's reign didn't end with a single moment. It ended in pieces. It ended when Greg said no more, when Maria stood up, when someone finally printed out memes instead of newsletters. It ended when an entire neighborhood decided enough was enough. And the power of collective silence broke. And here's the thing about bullies wrapped in bureaucratic armor. They expect obedience. They thrive on fear. But when you show them a mirror, when you make them the punchline, they lose their grip. I didn't fight Karen with lawsuits. I didn't fight her with yelling or threats. I fought her with boundaries. With footage. With a pool full of cherry-red absurdity. And it worked. The HOA has been quiet ever since. Not the creepy kind of quiet. The peaceful kind. The kind where neighbors talk again. Where nobody checks your mailbox flowers. Where laughter comes easier and nobody ducks behind curtains when someone walks by. And Jigglefest? It's now a neighborhood tradition. This year a local band asked to play. A bakery donated Jello-themed cupcakes. Someone even brought a piñata shaped like a clipboard. We didn't smash it. We just laughed and set it on a float in the middle of the pool. But the best part? A few days after Karen left, I got another note on the fence. Same yellow sticky. Same handwriting. Thanks for holding the line. Under it, a second line had been scribbled in Sharpie. Please let us know what color next year's gonna be. That's when I realized this story wasn't about gelatin. Not really. It was about dignity. About reclaiming your space. about saying no. You don't get to decide what I give. You don't get to take without asking. And the weirdest part? Sometimes the thing that breaks the tension, that exposes the cracks, that sets everything free, is a little bit of sugar, a whole lot of powder, and the will to stir until it sets. Karen came in like a queen. She left like a footnote. In my pool, it became a monument. To absurdity. To community. To one ridiculous, delicious act of defiance. Because in a world full of Karens, sometimes the most satisfying justice is served chilled.